Morning. I'm with Ross Orr, CEO of BacTech Environmental Corp. Hey, Ross, how are you today?
Good, Robert. Thanks. Good to be here.
Yeah, you're a little different from what the audience is accustomed to, but I think this is a really interesting company and a really interesting story. First of all, what is BacTech and why should anybody care about this company?
Well, originally BacTech, which started at King's College in London, England, back in the 80s, I think they were looking at taking sulfur out of coal so they could burn a cleaner product. But some Australians came along and said, look, this is really for liberating gold and silver from arsenopyrite and refractory pyrite. So why is that important? Well, because historically they used to burn that. They would burn the sulfides off in a roaster or smelter, and of course you had emissions that were not good, SO2, etc., arsenic trioxide. So this became evolved into really an environmental process for liberating gold and silver and stabilizing arsenic at the same time. So it's a very nice tight technology, and it ticks a lot of the boxes in today's mining world, right? It's all about the environment, and that's what we tout.
Okay, so what does the company do exactly? I mean, if you could explain, what does BacTech do? Like, what is the technology?
Okay, so our bugs eat rocks. That's our tagline, and effectively, that's what they're doing. When you dig a ton of rock out of the ground and you bring it to surface, about 20% of that rock is sulfides, and the sulfides contain all the metals that you want. The rest of the stuff is just waste rock. So they use a process called flotation, and they separate the sulfides into concentrates. It's those concentrates that go into these large stainless vats, where our workforce basically over the course of 6 days gobbles away at the sulfides. Think of a brick wall and chipping away the mortar around the bricks. Eventually everything is liberated. And what happens in these tanks is that the pH is very acidic. So anything that dissolves in acid, copper, nickel, cobalt, zinc, arsenic, obviously, does so. And anything that doesn't, like gold, silver, PGMs, you have at the end of the 6-day process, you have a solid liquid separation. So your oxidized gold and silver are now ready for conventional recovery because it's easy to get the gold now. The other material, the stuff that's in what we call the soup, is effectively where we stabilize the arsenic with iron. And if there are base metals of significance, economic significance, then we continue to raise the pH and we knock out, say, copper sulfate. We knock out nickel and cobalt together. So at the end of the day, what you have is a precipitate of what is called ferric arsenate, which is in the form of a gypsum, like wallboard material, which we dewater and stack and put to bed, and are very comfortable that arsenic is stabilized. So we chase arsenic, and there aren't many companies in the mining industry that say that. I usually pass the miner going in the opposite direction because his drill cord just hit arsenopyrite, and that's not something anybody looks forward to if you're in the exploration game. It just, it's perceived problems down the road as far as permitting and whatnot, and getting paid a decent price. So we were approached by a young guy in Ecuador, and effectively we've been developing this project there where arsenopyrite in a certain area in southwestern Ecuador is the prevalent concentrate that is produced. And right now it's shipped to China because they're the only buyers for arsenic for obvious reasons. And they don't pay very well because of the arsenic penalties. So what we're doing is building a plant in country that eventually will treat up to 250 tons of concentrate a day, and will produce 125,000 ounces of gold a year at net margins of 20%.
Okay, so that sounds like a huge opportunity there in Ecuador. What do you need to make that happen? Like, what do you need to build that processing plant?
$22 million. And we have been at it for a while. Why have we not raised the money? I get this question every day. Like, Ross, gold's $5,000. Why can't you raise the money? Well, Ecuador is an issue. The country hasn't had the best press in the last 3 or 4 years because the narcos in Colombia and Peru found Ecuador as a great way to get around shipping things out of South America. I would say our balance sheet doesn't back $22 million, and that's an issue because, as one gentleman said to me, if you can't make that plant work, what am I going to do with it? And the scrap value of that would probably be under $5 million. So, you get his point. What we did was we said, okay, we're not going to raise equity because we'll look like an Australian junior. Our market cap is only 10 million Canadian dollars. So we decided that any fundraising that we do for the project would be at the project level. So what we're offering people is the right to put up the 22 million, charge me whatever interest rate you want because the money's not going to be out there very long. The payback in this would be less than a year. And effectively, once you've received your capital, converting into a carried interest, a minority carried interest in the project, so which means that you won't have to participate financially in phase 2, but you can reap the benefits of being a 25% stakeholder. When that plant gets up to full capacity at 250 tons a day, we make over $100 million. And that's only because we did a bankable feasibility study at $1,600 gold and $18 silver. And we made $11 million at those prices. So you can imagine what we're making at 5,000. We're going to pay more than we would have in the past for the concentrates because the miners aren't stupid. They know that their margins are going to be sort of coming along with ours. But we don't pay tax for 12 years in Ecuador. So we've got effectively a project that spits out over $100 million. And it has full support from the community. It has all its permits in place, except for one niggling little land transfer from agricultural to industrial, which will get done shortly. I should have a shovel standing here in my hand because that's where we're at. I mean,
all right. So to be clear about a couple things, so the 100 million number that you threw out there, how long does it take you to make $100 million?
Well, the first phase is producing about 35,000 ounces a year, and we make over $30 million at today's prices. All right. The second phase of the project, which we would start working on at the same time as we're building phase 1, because there's a period of BioLeach test work that has to be done. Of course, you're permitting, feasibility study. That right now we're sort of targeting about $80 million for that. But once you've got the first phase up and running, there should be no more excuses from anybody about it doesn't work or it's dangerous. The plant is going to be like Fort Knox, and we're not that far from Guayaquil, so we'll probably helicopter our gold right from the roof of the gold pour room. And as I jokingly said to somebody the other day, they're still building mines in the Congo. And I would say that's probably a little riskier than Ecuador these days.
Yeah, it is. So with the arsenopyrite, are we talking about fresh ore from an artisanal mining operation?
Small miners, not necessarily small miners. I mean, some of these guys process 400 tons a day, and they're down 8 levels in their mines. I mean, these are fairly mature, but it's a big gold belt, and there's over 100 mines in this area. We're initially only dealing with 4 or 5 of the big guys. Phase 2 will start to incorporate more downstream, smaller mines into the process to get us to that 250 tons a day. I mean, the government loves it. You're not exporting, 30% of your value overseas. The people that work there are going to make a factor of 20 or so what they're making now. It's just a great situation, and it's frustrating that we struggle to get across the line. There's a lot of noise out there right now with gold at 5,000. Everybody's raising tons and tons of money, and in our story, I guess maybe we don't have an elevator pitch. I can't say we drilled 100 meters of 1.2 grams of gold. End of story. I've got to basically spend 15 or 20 minutes. So at PDAC coming up, our booth just says our bugs eat rocks. That's all it says. And that's done so people can go by, look at it, sort of, what the heck does that mean? Okay, now I've got you to talk to you for 15 or 20 minutes and educating on people on what bioleaching is all about.
So yeah, this is interesting because this brings me to like a fork in the road of which way to take this conversation. The natural question is, if the technology works, if the patent you have is so effective,
okay,
why
careful.
aren't
there's the present and then there's the future. Okay.
Patent pending.
Patent pending, exactly.
Okay.
The patent
All right,
pending.
so you don't have the patent yet. It's patent pending. So the patent pending, if this works, why aren't more companies and more countries, seeking your technology? It shouldn't just only be Ecuador, right? I mean, obviously that's a good opportunity, no doubt about it. But there's a lot of arsenic in the world.
I know, but we're mixing up apples and oranges here, Robert. So Ecuador is our existing proprietary technology that we've been using for years. It still produces a tail. All right. What you're talking about is on the future, on the patent pending, which we call zero tailings, is just that. All right. We've been working on material from Sudbury for a number of years now, and it culminated in the filing of a patent last April. And that patent basically takes two long-term liabilities that end up in tailings and turns it into a revenue or a profit center. So let me explain. In this case, pyrrhotite. Pyrrhotite is a very nasty sulphide mineral because it tries to oxidize itself so rapidly. The pentlandite they produce in Sudbury is the high-grade, easy stuff. So they've been splitting these two sulfides for 100 years and dumping them into lakes or burying them to starve it from oxygen. Vale approached us and said, do you think you guys can bioleach this material? And we said, we'll give it a go. We did. But the bad news for Vale was that the amount of nickel, copper, and cobalt that we recovered didn't make money. It was your costs were greater than your what you were selling. And then we stubbed our toe or banged our knee or hit our head. I don't know which description it is, but we found that if you add ammonia to that soup of metals, and the soup is iron, sulfur, copper, nickel, cobalt. When you add ammonia is like putting two magnets together. They repel iron. So you produce a synthetic magnetite that can be sold directly to the steel industry. Fortunately, ammonia likes sulfur. And so if you get them to band together and you get an organic fertilizer. All right. Now, those two products account for 75% of the total revenue of 1 ton of that waste. Only 25 of it comes from base metals. But think what you've done. You've taken two elements that you normally have to babysit for 100 years. You've got insurance bonds, you've got reclamation bonds, bond. A lot of money tied up, to sort of help if there's ever an issue down the road. If you take those tailings away, it would only make sense that your obligations through the insurance company would disappear. Now, this technology can also be strapped onto the back end of an existing mill. So, in the case of Vale, I don't know what their costs of producing nickel are per pound, but it's probably pretty high. They can now say, okay, we're also going to get credits for these other things that used to go out into the waste. So it lowers your operating costs dramatically. I mean, it's crazy. Now, we fortunately, Dr. Paul Miller, who is the inventor of the technology and who resides in Perth, Australia, we're bringing him to Perth because a group has asked him to present to the top 30 or 40 mining companies in the world to the heads of their ESG and sustainability. So hopefully that answers your question. Why isn't anybody using this? Well, this is kind of like a coming out party for us.
Okay, so to be clear, let's get this clear, because obviously I mixed the two for a second. I did have the understanding that what you're doing in Ecuador is different from everything else, but I wasn't quite so clear on the patent pending technology. So the zero tailings technology is patent pending.
Correct.
But and you're just rolling that out. That is actually pretty new. But
Correct.
What you're doing in Ecuador is not patent pending, and you just basically have the plan and it's ready to go, just pending financing.
Using the conventional bioleaching, what we call BACOX, BACOX. And that's what's very similar to Goldfields was really the inventor of the technology back in the 80s. We sort of produced, I'm going to be perfectly honest, we produced a Me Too that actually operated pretty well. We've got two of the top guys in the field, and we work very closely with Nadia Mikochik up at Laurentian University as well, who's Canada's best known academic in the biospace. So that technology works. We know that. We don't need to scale up anything. We've been there, we've done it. As you say, not the first rodeo. That technology we would love to continue to roll out to Peru, which is why I was there last week. Colombia, anywhere arsenic is an issue. And what we found in Peru last week was most of the arsenopyrite is sitting in the ground because the miner knows he's not going to get any value. Well, if BacTech builds a plant and starts paying much higher prices than the Chinese do, he will start to mine that material.
So this sounds like a huge opportunity, and the natural question is, why isn't this already being done? Right? Like, why either BacTech or another company isn't already doing this in Latin America?
There's over 20 bioleach plants that have been built globally, so they are doing it. And what you're finding now is that bioleaching or biooxidation has become the flavor of the year. Everybody up, there's all sorts of startups in the US raising up $100 million to go into the lab, and yet we're sitting here saying, we've done it. Like, why are we reinventing the wheel? Now, maybe it's because we're a small public company that nobody takes us seriously. I don't know the answer, to tell you the truth, but I'm not going to stop until we get Ecuador financed, because it opens up a Pandora's box of projects. Now, I will say that with the new technology, we will not be building those plants ourselves. It's just too big of a market. 80 billion tons of tailings globally, adding 10 billion a year. You need to sort of license this technology on a regional basis, country basis. That includes upfront licensing fees and perpetual royalties on the use of the technology.
So, let's go there, because the project in Ecuador seems very actionable, makes a lot of sense. I get it, and we know what the hurdle is there. Let's go to the zero tailings patent pending technology, because I think this is much easier for investors to understand, wrap their heads around. Basically, you're going to license this technology to large mining companies. It's going to be very valuable to them.
Engineering companies, governments. I mean, I don't care who licenses it, as long as they have the capacity to build a plant. And the capital's much more on these plants than it is on the gold plants.
Okay, so what is the revenue opportunity there for the zero tailings technology?
Wow. Well, I mean, effectively, you could take a ton of waste like we had at Valley and arrive at a dollar value of probably $500 or $600 a ton for the waste. And of course, your operating costs have to be less than that. And that's why we pilot. That's what we're doing right now. We're running piloting all this year with Merarco, which is Nadia Mikochik's group. And we will shortly be doing test work in Australia on material from a government, believe it or not, that has inherited a lot of stuff they don't want. And that happens a lot. I mean, one of the groups I met with in Peru last week was Activos Mineros, which is the wing of the government where all the orphan tailings end up because the mining company went broke or disappeared into the night or didn't have performance bonds in place 25 years ago. And that's a big market for us down there for sure.
So let's talk about the zero tailings technology a little bit, because I get it. This could be, I mean, if it works, it's very valuable because there are a lot of tailings that are sitting out there around the world that are environmental problems for locales and governments and corporations. So how does it work exactly, and what are the outputs? I mean, do the tailings just vanish?
All right, so like that description I gave you of the pyrrhotite. Now this works on pyrite, sphalerite, any of the sulphide minerals. I mentioned way back at the beginning that our bugs eat rocks. So technically, that's what's happening here. We take the old tailings, all right? We refloat them to produce a concentrate that has all the sulfides in there as much as possible. And because we don't need to make a high-grade concentrate like they do at the mill, we can virtually get the majority of those sulfide tailings. So they then go into the BioLeach tank. It runs through our conventional technology where the bacteria are doing what they do, which is liberating metals into solution. All right. What we're doing from there is we're just hooking that bioleaching up to existing technologies that have been used for years. So, one question we always get is what about scale up? Because a lot of technologies die on the vine when you go from a lab up to building a plant. And there's been a lot of spectacular disasters over the years. The reality is that we're just taking what we do, which is bioleaching, that's our bailiwick, and we're attaching it onto existing technology. So we don't think there's going to be an issue with scaling. But we still have to build a demonstration plant. And someone's going to have to shell out $40 or $50 million at some point in time to say, we're backing this technology and we're putting this money up. Now, 40 to 50 million seems like a lot, but when you look at the global market for this technology, it's not a lot at all.
Okay, so again, we're talking big dollar numbers again here for a small company, right? Have you thought about just let's go private? Let's not deal with public markets. Let's just go private. And I mean, it seems to me when we're talking about 22 million, 40 million, $50 million, these are pretty big dollar figures that frankly would be challenging for a 150 million market cap company to raise. I mean, maybe today it's possible if you have the right project or projects, but it's a heavy lift for your current market cap, right?
We have a very, very loyal shareholder base. The number of people that own 1 million shares in our company is, I'm going to say it's over 100. You can do that when you're that cheap, right? But going private, what number would you put on the table that would make these people come across the line? I don't think 50 cents would even do it, to tell you the truth, because we're pitching our story. The long-term value of this company is billions. It's not millions. And honestly, I think somebody takes a run at us eventually to get their hands on the zero tailings technology. And if the number is right, you're going to sell it. But you're going to hopefully retain a royalty on future projects, etc. Even a small one is worth a lot of money. And hopefully what we could do is say, look, you're not interested in the gold side, so we'll dividend that out to the shareholders and keep going. Because the margins in the gold side are way higher than they are on the toll treatment side for tailings. Way 20+%.
Yeah. I mean, the numbers are compelling, and the concept makes total sense to me. Also, some of the challenges that you've run into also make sense. But I also understand why the market doesn't get it right now, right? So what is the opportunity today to new shareholders in BacTech? Like, what is lined up for 2026 in terms of catalysts?
Well, we have a number of different groups out looking for that capital for us. The biggest catalyst, of course, would be if we get the 22 million. And by the way, we have a standing offer from a metal trader for $10 million offtake once we get funded to build the plant. I mean, they're not stupid. They're not going to give you the money before they know there's going to be a plant built. I think that the announcement of that would, I think, take you to 50 cents a share. And I'm just picking a number out of the air, but significantly higher than where we are now, because there's just so much pent up demand here waiting for this to happen. If I had a nickel for every time somebody said to me, well, when you get the financing, call me back. Because people will pay 15 or 20 cents if they know that there's actually going to be a project at the end of the day. The hesitancy, of course, today is, well, you haven't got it, so you have nothing. Well, that's not true, but like as we've discussed, there's a lot of other things going on in the company outside of just Ecuador. So that's probably the first catalyst, and I honestly, I'm hoping that happens sooner than later, because we have to make, what's the expression? Make the sun shines, or make I can't remember. But that's definitely the first one, because that opens
when the sun is shining.
Thank you. So that sort of opens up a Pandora's box. Again, we're going to start working on Peru now, just because we can't put all of our eggs in one basket in Ecuador at the same time. We need to have a parallel strategy to talk to the market about what we're doing. So that's probably the biggest catalyst of all, because once that money's raised, it's 12 to 14 months of construction before we actually start to produce gold in 2027. And then again, start working immediately right on phase 2. There's no reason you couldn't build 2 plants at once. You could also, if you had the capital, obviously. Now there's a group that's approached us for Peru that wants to be a partner with us, and they've asked us to go out and look around for tailings, and that's what I was doing in Peru last week. I found some interesting stuff too.
I bet. Yeah, it's quite a country for mining. So digging a little bit into the Ecuador plant. So let's say you do get the funding next week. Are you ready to hit the go button and build this thing? And also, do you have the skilled people on the ground there to actually operate it?
Yeah, well, we have a Canadian, actually / British COO, David Tingy, who has built a number of projects in South and Central America. He must be getting bored by now, because he wants to get at it, and he speaks Spanish fluently. Lived in Bolivia for a number of years. So we will then bring in a construction company that will under his tutelage will build this plant. It's at the beginning, it's a huge welding operation, right? Because you're welding these massive tanks made out of stainless that sit, they can be 30 feet high by 20 feet across. Big volumes. And of course, it's modular, so you can build the first phase, and then the second phase can be built alongside the first phase without interrupting its production. So, to 2-3 years from now, you're up to 125,000 ounces a year, which is a lot of money today. That's $750 odd million, and you're making over $100 million.
It would seem to me in this environment that there would be a gold streaming company that would be very interested in this opportunity, and at least partially funding it.
Well, I did mention that there's a potential offtake there for us, but to go back to the royalties of the streamers, talk to all of them. Well, majority of them. What's your collateral? Well, I don't want a bioleach plant. So with their conventional deals, they can always seize the deposit, right? That's the collateral on anything they do. And if the mining company goes broke, they take the deposit, they turn around, they do a deal with another company.
Right.
You can't do that with a bioleach plant. You can't even pick them up and move them somewhere else.
So they view it as too much of a risk, despite the fact that they could get very good terms.
Yeah, but that's what PDAC's all about, right? We've got a whole bunch of meetings lined up to sort of give updates to people we have spoken to in the past. $5,000 gold is much different than $2,000. What was gold last year at PDAC? It probably was about $2,000 or so. The world has changed, and unfortunately, everybody's out drilling holes in the ground, and that sort of captures the attention of most people that invest in junior mining. Not earnings. But this project, that first phase of that project, depending on how much we own at the end of the day, could produce 10 to 15 cents a share in earnings, and we're a 4-cent stock. People look at me and go, "Yeah, right."
Yeah, I mean, it like, unless you take the time to understand it, it comes off as a pie in the sky sort of dream pitch, right? By the way, last year at PDAC, gold was approaching 3,000 for the first time, right? It was in that $2,800 to $3,000 range, and then a month later we got Liberation Day. Remember, it got above 3,000, and then it got whacked back down. But anyway, that's a conversation for another day. Yeah, we're sitting more than $2,000 an ounce above where gold was 1 year ago today. Let's talk about the company cash burn rate, right? Because I see this as like a call option, a really cheap call option on your ability to get the financing and build this plant in Ecuador, and with the potential upside of all the Zero Tailings Technology rollout and being able to license that, right? But my call option could get worth less if the cash burn rate is really high. So what's the company's finances currently?
We burn about 60 a month. I would say that our cash resources, including stock we hold at other company, about $500,000 right now. We have a very large shareholder in a gentleman by the name of Brett Wayland, who owns 26 million shares. That was a recent transaction. He's the son of one of my directors who passed away, but Brett has always been sort of an advisor to us. If we have to go out and raise $1 million, we can do it. I mean, I don't worry about that. But I don't like the dilution at these prices. That's the problem. Like I said, somebody said, "Why don't you just go to an investment banker and raise $22 million?" I said, "Because I have 1.5 billion shares outstanding, and I can't do that to the people that have supported us, and myself for that matter. I own 7 million shares that I paid for, every one, by the way. So we just keep at it. I can be pretty dogmatic." I have to be after all these years.
Yeah, it's tough raising money under 5 cents or even at 5 cents. It's painful. So I'm rooting for BacTech to turn it around here and have a double-digit share price in 2026. So just, can you summarize it for us, Ross? What is the opportunity here? What is the market not getting that the market might get later this year once you really show them?
Well, as I said, the first catalyst is the financing. The second catalyst would be revealing what we're doing with the government on the new technology as far as the future. I'm waiting for the ability to get the Canadian government or the US government aware of what we bring to the table for this technology, the future technology for critical metals and for environmental reasons, right? Because no tailings, no acid rock drainage. So, that's potentially out there. And I think probably part of the demonstration plant that we will eventually build will be funded partially by government funds. Because it's just too important. Just as an aside, we were thinking the other day, we read the Horn smelter's in trouble in Quebec because of arsenic issues. and they're under pressure to reduce the arsenic. And so it got me thinking about what about pre-treating concentrates before they go into a smelter, and taking out as much of the arsenic as you possibly can without destroying the sulfur that's needed for combustion and whatnot. It got me thinking about, you know, the big copper mine in Panama, which is one of the largest in the world, has been shut down because of environmental reasons. Just as a lark, I threw, would this project be a candidate for our technology in Chat GPT? And it came back with a, yeah, I mean, everything that technology does can solve the problems outside of digging the hole in the ground. I can't help you with that. That's going to happen no matter what. So we're just at the edge of like a kid in a candy store here right now. And we have had reach out from bigger companies so far, but they tend to move at a tortoise pace.
Yeah. It takes 4 months to get a yes or a no on anything. But that's interesting you said there about governments, because that's also very logical. Both the US and Canadian governments, and even some of the South American governments, could benefit greatly from this technology. And that is true about the Horn smelter. That's the only copper smelter in Canada today. And can you believe that there's talk about closing that in 2027? That seems as bad as the Germans blowing up all their nuclear power plants 5 years ago. I mean, it's talking about shooting yourself in the foot, but it's for environmental issues. So yeah, that's an opportunity, Ross. That's a
well, like I said, we're kicking cans all over the place here, because every time we turn around, we think, okay, here's another application. We just got onto this insurance thing about a week ago. We started talking about it, saying, who else benefits from this technology besides, you know, we won't be importing any more fertilizer into Canada, because we do now. We're going to, you know, there's all these green steel producers out there. Well, hey, wouldn't you like to have a green feed that doesn't come from something that was dug out of the ground? I mean, let's close the loop, so to speak. But, you know, we're a small company, so you kind of run around in circles, and you know, we're trying to be more targeted. I think that Paul Miller's speech at PDAC is going to change us dramatically, because anybody who should know about this technology in these senior companies is going to know, and they're going to have to say, tell us more about it.
Is that on March 1st or March 2nd?
His talk is on, well, it's actually an invitation only event, so no one can attend it outside of the people that have been invited. Sorry.
But it is during PDAC, and you will report back to us, you know, later. Right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay.
I mean, I usually come out of PDAC with a stack of projects like that. I mean, just this week, Cambodia, somebody reached out about bioleaching, because they said the concentrates that we produce from the mine we're opening are subject to a 25% export tax. So basically, the government's saying, process it here or pay us, right? So they said, okay, let's look at bioleaching. There's another project in Quebec that we're looking at on nickel that came to us. You know, the trouble is that you just can't dance with everybody. You know, you have to be very selective at this stage. But at some point in time, we will get around to these other projects.
Ross, can you tell me how shareholders or potential shareholders can contact you?
Call me. I talk to people all the time. I answer my phone unless it says unknown number, leave a message and I'll call you back, because there's just too many scammers out there right now.
Is that on the news release?
Yep.
Okay.
And by email, obviously, of course, as well.
Okay. Ross Orr, CEO of BacTech Environmental, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.